Few are ever invited, but tonight it is you. Step inside the Ink and Lantern Society, where shadows guard their secrets, but the dead still have stories to tell. Tonight, you will walk beside me through history's forbidden corridors, each dark truth waiting to be heard. Now that you've crossed our threshold, subscribe to descend deeper into our sacred crypts and confess in the comments below your favourite tale from history's gallows. Breathe slowly. Let the outer world fade. You are among the keepers now. There was once a commerce that moved not in the noisy clamour of the marketplace, but along hushed corridors of stone, across the dark waters of the Mediterranean, and into the candlelit drawers of European apothecaries. It was not gold that passed from hand to hand, nor silk, nor spice, but a substance called Mummia. From the medieval world of the 12th century through the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th, this strange commodity travelled from the sands of Egypt to the streets of Europe, crossing 6 centuries as a supposed cure-all. The name promised healing. It suggested something rare, potent, enduring. To those who bought it, Mummia was believed to hold the very essence of ancient life, a medicine drawn from the heart of antiquity. But in truth, Mummia was the ground remains of human beings. It had travelled far, from tombs sealed in the desert silence of Egypt to the bustling ports of Venice and Marseille, then along cobbled streets to the shelves of physicians and apothecaries. The jars were small, the powder was brown, dry, and faintly scented of resin. It was measured on brass scales, mixed into wine or water, and swallowed by those who believed it could cure pain, prevent illness, even guard against death itself. To understand how the dead came to be consumed as medicine, we must begin where they were meant to rest forever. Imagine a tomb deep in the stone belly of Egypt. The air is dry, still, and close. Flickering torchlight plays over painted walls, scenes of harvest, of hunting, of banquet, moments from a life intended to last beyond the grave. For the ancient Egyptians believed death was not an ending, but a passage. They spoke of the ka, the vital spirit, and the ba, the personality, 2 parts of the soul that would be reunited in the afterlife if the body could be kept whole. Mummification was the key. A priest, trained in sacred rites, would preside over the process. First, the body was cleansed with palm wine and water from the Nile. Through a small incision, the organs were removed, the liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, and placed in their own carved jars, each guarded by a protective spirit. The heart was left untouched. For to the Egyptian mind, the heart was the seat of thought and emotion, the proof of a person's being. The empty body was then covered in natron, a natural salt, and left to dry for 40 days or more, until every trace of moisture was gone. After this, the skin was anointed with oils and perfumes, and the limbs wrapped in hundreds of yards of fine linen, layer upon layer, each bound tight with resin to seal the body against decay. The finished mummy was placed in a coffin, the coffin set within a larger sarcophagus, and all sealed within the tomb. The doors were blocked with heavy stones, the entrance hidden, and the dead left to their long sleep. No one was meant to enter again. No one was meant to disturb this silence. But centuries later, Strangers from far away would cross the desert sands, push open the doors and turn this place of rest into a source of profit. Not all who found their way into Egypt's tombs came as thieves. Some came as guides, men who knew the desert's lines as if they were the creases of their own palms. They could lead a caravan by starlight, find water where none seemed to be, and, when asked, point to a half-buried doorway that had not been opened in centuries. Some guides were loyal to the land's keepers and refused such work. Others, driven by poverty or debt, agreed to lead the way. Payment might be coin, or it might be a promise, a portion of whatever could be carried away. These guides seldom stayed to see the work. They would leave their parties at the tomb's edge, turn their camels toward the horizon, and vanish into the dawn. Behind them, others would step into the cool, stale air and take what the desert had guarded for 1,000 years. The path from sacred burial to apothecary shelf begins with a word. In Persian, mum meant bitumen, a thick tar-like mineral that glistened dark in the sun. For centuries it had been used in medicine, to seal wounds, to ease pain, to draw out what was thought to be illness from the body. When traders from the Arab world first saw the linen-wrapped bodies in Egypt's tombs, their skin darkened by resins and tar, they believed they had found a new and potent source of this mineral. The name Mummia shifted slowly. No longer did it refer only to the substance from the earth. It began to mean the embalmed body itself, and in time, the very flesh, ground fine, became a thing sold, swallowed, and sought after. By the 12th century, the confusion was complete. In the eyes of European merchants, Mummia was not stone from the mountains, but the preserved remains of the ancient dead. Not all Mummia came openly through the ports. Customs officers in Venice and Marseille were known to inspect cargoes bound for the apothecaries, and so smugglers found their own paths. In the dim hold of a merchant ship, barrels marked for dates or cumin might hold instead a powder darker than any spice. Sometimes the bodies were left whole, wrapped in coarse sailcloth, laid beneath layers of legitimate goods. If discovery came, the loss could be ruinous. Confiscated goods, fines, even imprisonment. But the profit was such that many took the risk. Sailors spoke of the smell, faint, resinous, unlike anything else in the hold. And in the crowded quayside taverns, those who unloaded such ships kept their voices low for fear of the wrong ears hearing the word Mummia. Picture an apothecary's shop in Renaissance Venice. The air is rich with the mingled scents of dried herbs, ground spices, and the faint tang of metal from mortar and pestle. Light filters through small windows, illuminating rows of wooden drawers, each labelled in a careful hand. Among the cinnamon and cardamom, among the jars of powdered pearl and dried comfrey, is a smaller drawer. Inside, wrapped in parchment or tucked into small glass vials, is Mummia. It is brown, granular, with a faint odour of resin. To those who sell it, it is a rare and precious commodity. To those who buy it, it is a cure. A customer approaches the counter, describes an ache, a weakness, a lingering sickness. The apothecary measures out the powder, tipping it into a cup of wine, assuring the customer of its potency. From Venice, the trade spreads. In the markets of Marseille and the streets of London, Mummia becomes a remedy for bruises, headaches, and the gravest of plagues. The dead of ancient Egypt are being consumed, one careful spoonful at a time. In the same cities where apothecaries sold mummia, there were those who denounced it, not for moral reasons, but for trade. Competing merchants, who dealt in other exotic remedies, spread whispers that mummia was useless, even dangerous. A spice seller in Marseille might tell a customer that saffron was the true cure for plague, not that foul dust from the desert. A perfumer in London might claim that the resin in mummia caused fevers rather than cured them. Some went further, accusing rivals of selling counterfeit mummia, even when they themselves sold the same. Such accusations could ruin a shop, though proving them was nearly impossible. In the crowded, competitive world of exotic medicine, mummia was not just a commodity, it was a battleground. The road from a sealed tomb to an apothecary's drawer was long and often illicit. Merchants in Cairo dealt quietly with those willing to risk the law. Some bribed guards at the ancient sites. Others paid local guides to lead them to forgotten entrances. The mummies were taken from their resting places, loaded onto ships bound for Europe, passed from hand to hand until they reached the cities of the West. In Venice, they were unpacked from their crates, their linen wrappings discarded, the bodies dried, crushed, and sifted into powder. The trade was brisk enough that not all mummia came from Egypt. When tombs grew harder to rob, merchants sought substitutes, recent corpses, bodies from paupers' graves, even the preserved remains pulled from the peat bogs of the north. To the buyer, the difference was invisible. Once ground, one body looked much like another. The trade in mummia did not rely solely on merchants. There were men, and sometimes whole families, who made their living by unearthing the dead. In Cairo and along the Nile, they were called by many names, but in England they would have been known as resurrection men. Their skill was not in healing, but in finding what others wished to remain hidden. By night, they rode out beyond the watch of the city gates, their donkeys laden with tools, picks for stone, crowbars for stubborn seals, canvas sacks to carry what linen could not conceal. A skilled robber could open a tomb without breaking the painted plaster, leaving only a shadow of disturbance to mark their passing. They sold not only to the mummia merchants, but to collectors and travellers who wanted a souvenir of Egypt's past. In the narrow streets, their names were rarely spoken aloud, but their work kept the drawers of Europe's apothecaries from falling empty. When a king believes in a cure, the kingdom listens. Francis I of France is said to have carried mummia with him wherever he went, mixed with rhubarb to guard against sudden illness. King Charles II of England kept it among his private remedies. His personal physician, Nicolas Lefebvre, was an influential man and a devotee of what he called corpse medicine. He believed that the vitality of the young and healthy dead could be transferred to the living through consumption. Such convictions were shared across Europe. In the mid-1600s, the German physician Johann Schröder described in precise detail how to prepare a fresh mummy for medicinal use. Take the fresh, unspotted cadaver of a red-haired man who has been executed and died a violent death. The body, he advised, was to be cut into pieces, salted, dried, and steeped in wine and myrrh, a recipe meant to mimic the ancient dead when the supply from Egypt faltered. In the halls of power, Mummia was no longer a curiosity. It was a mark of refinement, a luxury as much as a medicine. What the nobility consumed, the wealthy merchants soon followed, and the demand grew. By the 17th century, quiet voices of skepticism began to echo through the scholarly world. Travellers returning from Egypt reported that many so-called ancient mummies were nothing of the kind. Some had been dead only a few years. The resins, they said, were not always the prized bitumen of old, but fleshly substitutes. In 1597, the English herbalist John Gerard examined Mummia and declared it far from miraculous, more likely to cause an upset stomach than to cure disease. Yet the habit persisted, for the faith in Mummia was less about proof than about belief, and the belief was bound up with the grandeur of Egypt itself. By the late 17th century, organised excavations had begun in parts of Egypt, led by antiquarians and early scholars. But such digs were not always as controlled as the journals claimed. At night, workers might return to a site unsupervised, carrying away smaller finds, amulets, beads, fragments of linen, to sell in the markets. In some cases, an entire mummy would vanish between one day's excavation and the next. Officials blamed local thieves, but often the thefts were the work of the very men hired to uncover the past. For them, a single body could mean months of wages in a single sale, and no guard could watch every shadow. Some imitations of Mummia were crude, the work of those who thought only to profit quickly. But others were the work of craftsmen. A skilled counterfeiter could take a recently dead body and, with resin, natron, and linen, give it the colour, texture, and scent of an ancient burial. In some cases, they copied the hieroglyphs onto the wrappings, using ink mixed with soot and gum Arabic. Travellers and scholars alike were fooled. A counterfeit might even survive the scrutiny of a collector, only to end its days in the pestle of a physician's shop, ground into the powder that a patient would swallow without ever knowing it came not from a pharaoh's tomb, but from the hand of a forger in a back room. As the 18th century dawned, medicine began to change. The study of anatomy deepened. New remedies, grounded in experimentation, replaced the old corpse cures. Mummia lost its place on the apothecary's shelf. Yet the fascination with Egypt endured. In the parlours of Victorian London, wealthy hosts staged mummy unwrapping parties, where linen was unwound before an audience, the ancient form beneath revealed to candlelight and curiosity. Many of the mummies brought to Europe for these displays, or for earlier trade, are now gone entirely, ground to dust or scattered. Their absence is part of Egypt's loss. And so, in the hush of history's archive, Mummia remains a reminder that the longing to heal, to live a little longer, can lead even the learned into the most shadowed commerce of all, a trade between the living and the dead. And so the last page turns. The lantern's glow softens, its golden circle folding gently around you. The shadows of the past never truly fade. They linger in forgotten archives, whispering their secrets to those brave enough to listen. Tonight, you have listened well. Now stay close to the fire, where the embers breathe in quiet rhythm and shadows shift like old ink across time-worn pages. Let the night draw its cloak about you, and let these stories settle deep, their whispers twining with the crackle of the flame. Remember, history is written by the victors, but the real stories? Those belong to the shadows to be kept by the society. Rest now. The keepers are watching in the night, their lanterns lit to guard the distant halls. When darkness falls again and the lantern burns anew, the doors of the society will open to you once more.